Could just be days away from a major step toward the push forward in UFO transparency. Tomorrow, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will receive a SCIF briefing from UFO experts. As you may recall, a SCIF is a highly secure room where lawmakers can share classified information and hear it. That meeting will then be followed by a roundtable with experts and then a full committee hearing sometime next month. And if that wasn't enough, the National Archives updated its website last week with a button now on its website for all UFO-related documents to live in one place. So the question tonight is, did they release any new files that reveal anything big, or is it just more of what we already know about unidentified aerial phenomenon? Joining me now on the phone is Ryan Graves. He's the first active duty pilot to come forward publicly about UFO sightings. He's also the founder of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Ryan, great to have you here. First of all, who are the UFO experts who are going to be giving this very classified or secure briefing tomorrow in the SCIF? Do you know?
I don't know, and I think that's a very good question. I think a lot of what is going to be done in Congress in the near future is going to be informed from the education that Mr. David Grush is going to be able to provide the Congress people that he's now working with. So I expect that the experts will come as people that David Grush advised to potentially be on that board. And I think, based off of the testimony that David Grush made in 2023, he seemed to indicate that he had key knowledge about individuals and stakeholders and organizations, and I would expect that some of these experts may come from some of those organizations.
Right. David Grush is the person who kind of blew the lid off this whole thing when he came forward and said that there was a top secret government program that had retrieved alien remains of beings not of this world, as well as craft that were not from planet Earth. But after this bombshell interview here on News Nation and then his bombshell testimony in Congress, where he had to answer a lot of questions by saying, I can't tell you unless we're in a SCIF, we haven't heard much else. Do you think finally with these hearings, starting with the SCIF briefing tomorrow and the hearings scheduled next month, that we will begin to hear more about this, or is this something that will remain top secret?
Well, I'm not sure whether David Grush will be a participant in those upcoming SCIF briefs, but I'm confident that he has already had the ability to pass the information that he knows in a secure environment in a SCIF recently, now that he's been employed as a staffer on that congressional task force. Now, whether that information comes out of those hearings and immediately comes to the American people, I would suggest it will not. However, it will better arm the task force and congressional members to go forward and bring that information forward eventually. You
have really pushed for more transparency and more acceptance of military pilots who have been for years, pilots like yourself, who saw and recorded things and said this is not normal, this is not natural. And many pilots who felt intimidated about reporting what they were seeing. Has that changed at all, Ryan?
It is changing. There still is a lot of the institutional stigma and the lack of the proper reporting channels. But at safeaerospace.org, we have aircrew and professionals reporting to us every day about what they are seeing. And there is still much concern about where these are from, what the national security implications, and what the safety implications of them are. And while I know David Grush's conversations will be more focused on what government may have retrieved or understand about this topic, we can't forget that this is something that people have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, no kidding. Getting reports every day from pilots, both military and commercial, that's really something. Ryan Graves, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Lou Elizondo here with another, what I consider is an important update for you. I just arrived in the Washington, D.C. area for a week worth of meetings with some of my colleagues who you probably already know, people like Chris Mellon and several attorneys as well, and some other folks that you might know from some of our previous adventures together. People like Admiral Tim Gallaudet and Mr. Mike Gold from NASA. So the reason why we are here is that we are having some discussions on the Hill, like we do normally, But what makes this a little different is that we're holding classified briefings, meaning we're having discussions with certain members of the House at the classified level. Forgive me, I'm also dog sitting, so my daughter's German Shepherd just walked by. Unfortunately, I cannot edit that out, so you're going to have to hear his pitter-pattering. We're having classified meetings with certain members of Congress on the House side, to be followed by classified meetings on the Senate side. Now, what is the purpose of these meetings? It's not just to sit there and exchange information in glad hand. What we have been trying to do for the last 3 years, really, in some of these more intense engagements, is to try to help government work better. Meaning, you have elements on the legislative branch that are responsible in this particular case. For example, Congresswoman Luna, who has a task force for transparency and truth, and the UAP topic is part of it, to include the JFK files and the MLK assassination and some other things like that. UAPs tend to be right at the top of her list of to do. There's an expectation by Congress. There's also an expectation by our president to get to the bottom of things. And this is a topic that we all know has been in secret for way, way too long. So her, along with her colleagues and peers, to include Representative Eric Burleson and also Representative Tim Burchett, will be attending these meetings. And what we are doing is bringing elements from the executive branch, particularly the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who have their own investigative type capability. We also are bringing in people from the Department of Defense. I won't say which particular organizations yet, because I don't want those individuals to get in any trouble through their chain of command. And also individuals from the intelligence community, people who have been for quite some time involved in this area for the government and for their respective organizations, to brief Congress what they know. Now imagine that, the executive branch and the legislative branch sitting down for the very first time, having a classified discussion about what they all know about this topic regarding UAP, what's the latest information, what's the latest investigative results. I also want to take a moment here to tip my hat to some individuals that have been working this topic from specifically the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They have been doing an absolutely incredible job. As a former investigator myself, I know it's certainly not an easy task. And I will tell you that they have some of the best looking into this topic and have been for some time. And, don't be surprised if they have some interesting results to share with members of Congress. Same thing with the Department of Defense. Specific big thanks to U.S. Space Command. As many of you know, I spent some time working for U.S. Space Force in this capacity, studying the UAP topic for the government. After I left my last position in ATIP. But you may not know that Space Command, which is a combatant command, different than Space Force, which is a service, kind of like the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, while Space Force is another member of our services, whereas Space Command is a combatant command. So where we have these combatant commands that are usually regionally focused, like SOUTHCOM, Southern Command, and EUCOM, European Command, Space Command basically is responsible for all of space. And so they've been doing really a tremendous job as well. And then I'd also like to point out that there are elements in the intelligence community that are also extremely proactive on this topic, trying to get information to the right people, both in the executive branch and ultimately to the legislative branch. Now, why this gets a little complicated is because people in the legislative branch don't always have the commensurate level of security clearance as people in the executive branch. And it is also the executive branch that controls security clearances. People think that, you're a member of Congress, automatically you get a security clearance. Not necessarily true, especially once you get above the TS and SCI level. It's usually only very specific committee members. So the fact that Representative Luna is on this new task force for Congress to get to the bottom of this topic, clearly, I think everybody would assume that she certainly has a need to know, same with her colleagues and her peers on the Hill. But with that said, we still have to do the necessary, you can call it a goat rope, if you will, dance, maneuver, to make sure that everybody has the right information and at the right time for the right place where we're going to have the conversation. So tomorrow, I think, is the beginning of a very important day for us collectively that are really pushing for disclosure, but also for our government. This is just common sense. This makes good sense. You finally have the executive branch and the legislative branch coming together under one roof to have a thoughtful conversation about this topic. Now, I know a lot of you probably think, well, duh, why didn't they do that before? Well, bureaucracy. The same issues that I faced when I was in the Pentagon having this conversation with my own chain of command is the same issue that seems to still be lingering in our government. Fortunately, there are people that have worked very hard to make these meetings happen and do everything, as we say in the military, dress right dress, or in this particular case, everything in according to protocol. I'm very optimistic that these briefings that we're going to be providing and some of those folks in the executive branch are going to be very helpful. Basically help Congress look in the right places. Where is information been squirreled away? And where can Congress start asking for specific data, right? Also, I think it's important to highlight the fact that, there's been whispers that there may be new legislation, wink, wink. I think that's great. And I think you should all be very happy with that. There's a lot of people working right now on your behalf for you, trying to get government to work a little bit more effectively, a little bit more efficiently. You also have people in government right now, for example, Representative Luna, Representative Burleson, and Burchett, who are championing this cause for you and on behalf of the American people, and really are quite fearless in their pursuit to getting to the bottom of this. I've seen some of their discussions and their approaches to this topic, and honestly, I can't say when the last time I saw so much earnest motivation to try to shed light on this topic, and not just for themselves. This is not selfishly motivated, like, oh, this is just some casual curiosity, idle curiosity that they want to satisfy. No, every time I've been in these meetings, they're talking about you, the American people. They're saying you are the reasons why they're doing this and that you deserve the truth. And I could not agree more with that. That is absolutely what we want our elected officials doing. And the fact that you have now elements in the executive branch that are volunteering to come forward and have this conversation when in the past all we got was obfuscation and denials. I think I don't want to say it's necessarily historic, but it might be historic. I also want to say that I can't take credit for all of this. This has been a result of a lot of people's work and effort, first and foremost by elements in Congress. So if you ever want to take a moment and just thank those particular members of Congress and their staff that I mentioned, they'd probably appreciate it. I'm sure they would appreciate the encouragement because it's definitely not an easy task. I would also, if you get a chance, maybe say thanks once in a while to folks in the law enforcement community and the FBI. Look, there's another effort underway right now through state, local, tribal law enforcement communities. There's a gentleman named Dr. Keith Taylor, who's also a senior law enforcement official, who's been very helpful getting this conversation moving with the local law enforcement, state law enforcement folks, and trying to integrate that with the federal law enforcement piece, investigating UAPs. Think of it as a force multiplier, right? So if you have maybe 5 or 10 special agents from the FBI investigating UAP, imagine now if you can kind of, in a way, disseminate some of these requirements for law enforcement collection down to the state and local level. Well, you have literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of law enforcement officers that have eyes and ears just like everybody else, right? So this is coming together in a way that I think 8 years ago, had you have told me that this is where we would be, I don't think I'd have believed you. It is truly remarkable. We're living in amazing times right now. We have elements in the executive branch, politics aside, that are very supportive of getting to the bottom of this and revealing the truth to the American people, which is really what this is all about. So yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day for all. You just heard Edmund in the background. I think he agrees too. So Anyways, you know, I don't like to do these unless there's something to update you on, these YouTube videos. So I think there's something to update you on. Take care, and we'll chat soon. God bless.